I have to tell you, Italian designers really want to feed us. That stupid idea that fashion people don't need is out the window. Hi guys, I'm Alex Badia. I'm the style director of Women's Wear Daily, and I'm here with my lovely co-worker, Turra.
Hi, ciao.
I am so happy that we're talking about Milan Fashion Week. This has been a very different season, probably the most strange season you and I have ever experienced. For the first time, we haven't done it together. Can you talk to me about how your experience was?
I mean, of course, this was like not a regular fashion week. Of course, it was much quieter. There were like mainly Italian people. And of course, the industry is reacting and, the designers are keen to showcase what they are working on. And, they are preparing for a major return of fashion as we used to know it. Of course, I felt extremely grateful to be able to go to the shows. I didn't feel that I was in a dangerous situations. I think the Italian companies really managed the organization of the shows very, very well. We found out something that it probably was much more than our expectations.
The biggest news of Milan Fashion Week was the PRADA show.
I mean, this show is a milestone because for the first time in the history of PRADA, Miuccia Prada was joined by another creative director, and for sure not like a young designer, but a huge name of the fashion industry with a very different vision. I mean, I think that both Miuccia and Raf are like designers who love to think ahead, but the answers to the questions are usually very, very different. What we had was the first collection, which really felt like a combination of the signature Prada aesthetic and femininity with the more futuristic vision of Raf Simons. So I think that watching at the show, it was very recognizable what was truly Prada and what was Raf touch. It was really interesting to see how two creative minds like that work together. I think the message was strong.
Do you know that there was the show and then there was the Q&A, sending questions beforehand, and the Q&A sort of like format might stay. I think that some designers might adopt that. But in the Q&A, going back there, I think Raf Simons said something interesting. How Miuccia dresses is very often a kind of a uniform, one way or another. And that was a direct inspiration for me for the show. I think the idea of uniform was very interesting as a concept. Yes, obviously, he revisited 90s Miuccia Prada uniform, the simplicity, the minimalism. He took some of his elements that you mentioned, the cool factor. Those uniform ideas are really very modern and relevant.
Let's talk about FENDI.
I knew it! That was a trap!
I think it felt really emotional, which was like a big show, but with a very, very limited number of guests. Felt extremely intimate, extremely emotional. Probably because it was the last show as Sylvia as a women's creative director at the brand, because she will be joined by Kim Jones in the next collection. It was a collection about femininity. It was a collection about family, about traditions, about the love of simple pleasure. And it was a collection that really celebrated the human factors, especially in the way artisans can create certain things and with the hands.
FENDI had it all. It was gorgeous. I love the accessories were fabulous. There was that one look the Leon Dame, the model, wore. That is, and also Paloma El Cesar. There's one of the two last looks. They were all white with the quills and the linen. It felt you were bringing your bedroom. And for me personally, it's always been a dream of mine to be able to walk with my bed with me, And I love also the idea of that diverse casting.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Jasmine Levon and in a runway show for so long. So it felt really modern. And some of the bags were fabulous. And I love the gloves. I think gloves is also a big accessory trend for the season.
Yeah.
And the fact that they send us a pesto recipe with pasta. I have to tell you, Italian designers really want to feed us. Talk to me about another show that you loved.
Versace.
Oh my God, thank God you said Versace.
I think it was so Versace, you know. And what you expect from Donatella is some fun, color, sexiness, femininity, flamboyancy, boldness. And she put all these ingredients in a collection that we will definitely remember. It was such a pity that she decided, and I understand that she closed the door on the shows and she just had employees attending. The set was fantastic. You know, the casting and the music was insane, and you know, the energy was incredible.
I personally always love the Lost World of Atlantis. I do need something that is upbeat, and that's what Versace gave me. I also felt that when it came to menswear, it really hit a lot in some trends. Again, the Bermuda short, the mini suit, the leather on leather, obviously pastel. It's all over the runway and bright colors as well, but no one does them like Versace. I also love those micro pleated dresses. The way they move, they're like waves of an ocean. I want to talk about another show that you went to, that it was Valentino.
Another very emotional show. We are probably more sensitive right now after what we went through, but the Labyrinth performance was insane. The location was great.
That was very un-Valentino, because Valentino normally is so like couture, Paris. They came back to Milan.
You know, of course, people associate Valentino with Paris in terms of shows. And of course, when they are in Paris, they channel the Paris mood with the grandeur. Moving to Milan, which is much more of an industrial city, you wanted to create a connection between the show and the city. The industrial space set the tone of the collection. I think felt much more realistic and modern and contemporary than other beautiful, of course, collection that Pier Paolo did before. I think that it is getting closer to the street, that it is like absorbing what's going on in the world and is elaborating through the Valentino lens and language.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Ale, the FOMO is killing me. Oh, thank you so much for telling me to really try to convey the feeling, because that's something that in a way you miss from watching it from home. We know that Pier Paolo is an eternal romantic. He puts love at the forefront of everything he does. And when it comes to couture, it really shows. But I did think that these felt less couture than past ready to wear. So he was trying to develop the identity, to go to the core of people's individuality, and that allowed for a sense of freedom. So I like the idea of love equals freedom. I do love the idea of how men and women share shapes and some volumes and even fabrics and constructions and prints. So you saw those wardrobe staples that is like a mini short with a big blouse and some kind of print. It works in both genders. So looking back to your own DNA, to really just go and take things that are already existing and say, like, this is part of who we are. Milan has been a lot about going back to your core. I want to talk about fun. And one thing we need to talk about is Moschino. Because if you want to have a good time, we need to talk about that genius show.
Basically, the genius of Jeremy Scott recreated a runway show, like I would say old school runway show.
Old school couture show.
Old couture show in miniature. And then there were the actual puppets that were the models, like walking on the catwalk, showing these clothes, these micro clothes, which I think were so difficult to do.
And expensive to make.
It's more difficult, like doing those like micro dress rather than like the normal one. It felt so unexpected.
I mean, what was so amazing and so inventive was that he collaborated with Jim Henson's Creator Shop, that he's the creator of the Muppets. It's kind of, for me, it's fascinating because the Muppets are a very different concept, because we love Miss Piggy, we love Kermit, we love the Muppets. That's a different. The fact that he was able to bring that whole world of like couture into the mix of something that feels so adventurous in the creation, and so of today. I think that is the perfect show for social media. I think that you could see a lot of craftsmanship in the creation of the clothes.
Oh my God. That I've never seen, honestly, on a Moschino cutout before.
Me neither. I wanted to be seated there as a little puppet. That would be hilarious. I see Anna Wintour as a puppet was hilarious. So you want to continue talking about MSGM? Because I know you feel, I love MSGM. We love it.
I love the concept of the whole project they developed. They basically did a street casting. They selected 12 girls with very different backgrounds. Sri Lankan writer was based here to interview them, posing them like questions. Some of them very basic, some of them more profound. If you really felt that gave voice to a generation of women that sometimes don't really have a stage to talk about themselves. And this reflected in the collection because the same girls that appear in the video are also the protagonists of the lookbook. Massimo Giorgetti and Robbie Spencer, the stylist, did a pre-selection of some looks, and then they gave total freedom to the girls to pick what they wanted to wear. So it's very interesting to see how they create a sort of conversation with the clothes, how they perceive their body, and how they mix the things together and interpreted the clothes, because it's very different to see something shown on a model or on a real person. And in this case, all the girls were fantastic and beautiful in their like uniqueness. But it really showed that fashion needs to, fashion is real. Trying to break boundaries, trying to give them voice, trying to do something different, trying to break the rules of the established rules of the industry is really relevant, honestly.
I love the idea of an experiment, a social experiment, in which he really used the subjects as basically part of his own market research of how to create a collection, how to change things to really make them a reality. This felt to me like a much more mature effort. You still had like a tangerine suit.
Let's spend a few words on
All right, let's talk about Emporio Armani.
They did a super interesting video.
I loved it.
They had like a stellar cast. It felt super Armani. It felt very fresh and modern. I love the silhouettes, especially for men's. I love the colors, this like super light palette, very ethereal.
Yes. I also like what he said, that nothing can replace a physical show, but he did the best to replace it. I love the white section, especially for men's. It was great. The deconstruction of the suit, sleeveless with a little extended top here to keep the silhouette going. All the sleeveless numbers, the big volume in the pants. I love his view of suiting. It was great. But that takes me to some of the biggest trends of the season. Bright colors. We saw it at MSGM. We saw it at Versace. We talk about femininity as well, right?
Oh, for sure a FENDI, for sure a PRADA. It was
PRADA.
It felt very feminine.
And Moschino, super feminine.
Moschino was super feminine. I think Ferragamo.
Valentino, obviously.
Valentino, of course, was
super feminine. Oversized shirts are also a trend. I mean, Valentino had a lot of oversized shirts. Uniform is another trend.
Uniform. Lace and pearls for men.
I agree. And can we talk really quickly about the kitten heel?
Oh yeah, the kitten. Be careful.
I'm very careful.
From being cool and looking like your grandmother, it takes like a sec. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Ali. It was great being with you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And remember, for the latest reviews and breaking news, go to WWD.com.